Hey guys, this is Dave with Valor Fire Training. We are here tonight. It is 6 o'clock Central Time. I am joined by Brandon Fletcher. How's it going, man?
Oh, pretty good. How about yourself, Dave?
I'm good, man. So, for those of you that don't know Brandon, he is the fire chief of Gilt Edge Volunteer Fire Department in Tennessee. He's a 20-year student of the fire service. He's a CFO. You have probably more stuff in your dossier than I've seen out of a lot of people. So you are extremely educated and extremely well versed in administration and leadership. And you're also a veteran. And, a lot of the similarities that we've talked about in the past with the military and public safety, you have some interesting takes on stuff. And so I'm excited to kind of dive into it tonight. We are going to talk about primarily leadership and leading from the front. But I think we're going to probably end up rabbit holing into a bunch of other stuff.
It'll be good times. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So did I leave anything out?
I think he summed it up pretty well. It's a
Perfect.
lot of wallpaper.
Yeah,
Doesn't always translate to success, but it's a lot of wallpaper.
and it's funny that you mentioned that because you're right, it doesn't. It does not always equate to meaning anything. But you are, and just in the conversations that you and I have had, you are one of those people that you don't beat around the bush. So if it's something that's meaningful, if it's something where you're like, hey, I achieved this certification or I went through this class and it was great, you talk about it. And if you went through a class and you were like, yeah, it's literally a piece of paper that goes in the folder and it means something to somebody. And that's one thing that I've always respected of you as a chief is that mentality. So how long have you, first off, how long have you been a chief?
I started in July of 2015, so this was 6 years this year as the fire chief. And then I was deputy chief, lieutenant training officer prior to that. On the volunteer side, and then I've worked on the career side. I've served as a training officer / company officer and shift lead or senior firefighter. We didn't have company officers at the last department that I worked for. You just had a senior firefighter that reported directly to the chief.
Gotcha. Okay. And tell us a little bit about Guild Edge. Tell us kind of the demographic, the makeup. Do you guys have any specialties?
So Gilt Edge itself, the city of Gilt Edge is really small. It's only about 400 people. The Gilt Edge Fire Department covers an area that's about 52 square miles. It consists of the town of Gilt Edge, the town of Burleson, which is similar size to the town of Gilt Edge, and then an unincorporated area that surrounds that makes up the majority of our population and the majority of the square mileage that we protect. Last year we did 537 runs. We're on pace to blow that out of the water this year, thanks COVID. And we do pretty much your all hazards department. We do the structural firefighting EMS. We're starting to expand our role a little bit into the hazmat and special operations world. We do the vehicle extrication. We do the rope rescue. And getting a little bit into more of the technical rescue disciplines that go along with that. We run automatic aid to, I think, 5 other departments that border us. And then, of course, mutual aid throughout the entire county by request. So it keeps us pretty busy. And, for a department our size, we go to a decent number of fires. It's not a fire every day or every week, but it's enough to keep you busy, keep you motivated. When you have an all-volunteer staff, it's the 2 big things that keep people motivated are call responses and then realistic high-speed training. So we try to specialize in that for sure. I know you and I have talked really extensively about that.
We have. Yep.
But, so, that's kind of us in a nutshell. We got a really, really great group. It's about 20 volunteers. I think 21. We added a new guy, active duty Navy fella joined us. Last night was his first official drill. So we're up to 21 now. And it's a really, really dedicated team. I'm incredibly proud of them. They do a wonderful, wonderful job day in and day out to the point where, I can kind of like be that chief. I don't have to come around all the time.
Right.
And they're probably cool with that. And so, it's awesome to see them taking the ball and running with it. And I don't have to be hands-on. I don't have to be involved in everything that's going on because they're taking care of business.
Yeah. And, you know, I had the opportunity to meet some of your folks when we were at FDIC. I got to hang out with some of them. And I know the other day you guys were up at in Syracuse, New York for the rescue conference. And I got to, you and I were FaceTiming and I got to meet some of your other folks. And the one thing I will say is, you know, there are times where there's a disconnect between, you know, the fire chief's perception of the department and the people's perception of the fire chief. And the one thing that was really refreshing is when I was away from you and I was talking to your people, they had the same things to say as when they said when they were around you. You know what I mean? So you guys really do have that family atmosphere, and you guys have mutual respect between everyone. And the other cool thing that I really liked was that, you know, for being a volunteer department, for being a department that's growing and expanding, you guys do a lot of really cool stuff. You guys showed me the PSAs that you did, the videos about buckling up for your county. You know, so it's not just your department; it's for the entire area.
Sure.
About responding with your seatbelts on, and there were a couple other ones, and so it's really cool that you guys have that dynamic where you guys get to work on that.
Yeah, like I say, I can't brag on them enough. I mean, we could use up the whole time tonight just telling you cool stories about the stuff they do and everything. But yeah, it's an awesome team to lead.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, so let's talk about why we're here. So, I want to talk about leadership and leading from the front. And you have several classes that you do, but your leadership style and the things that you talk about in leadership are really, really interesting. So, where do you think we are currently with leadership in the fire service, and where do you think we need to be?
I think overall, just as a whole, I think it sucks. As a fire service as a whole. Now, obviously, there are some places that are doing it really, really, really well, but there's a lot of places that are doing it very, very poorly, and I think we see that both on the career side and on the volunteer side. I think the National Volunteer Fire Council did a study, and I don't remember the exact percentages, but when they surveyed the people that had left volunteer fire departments, the number one reason that was cited for leaving was poor leadership, toxic leadership, et cetera. And when they surveyed the management, the number one thing that management thought was the problem was there was not enough time to meet all the commitments, or people are just too busy. There's not enough volunteer spirit. There's not, it's this generational thing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And nobody wants to acknowledge that, maybe we suck at leading people. And I know you and I've talked about it on the career side. It's the same thing. There's a whole different set of motivations on the career side versus the volunteer side. But at the end of the day, people don't want to work for a crappy boss. People don't want to work for toxic leadership. They want to be appreciated. They want to be valued. They want their leaders to care about them. And really, I mean, to put it bluntly, you can be a dumbass, and if you care about your people, then they're going to respect you. They're going to help you out. They're going to carry you in those situations. Now, I mean, obviously, you don't want to be, so poor at your job performance that you have to be carried. That's a whole nother subject. But, if you care about your people, then, they'll make up for any shortcomings that you have. And it doesn't matter, whether you get a paycheck or whether you're volunteering on that side. People quit bad bosses. In most instances. I mean, obviously, we know there are times things happen, circumstances come up. Maybe you have a great boss, but maybe you work someplace that has really, really poor benefits, really, really poor pay, and there's an opportunity to go somewhere that may better yourself. I mean, that's understandable, but generally speaking, people will tolerate other crappy aspects of the job if they work for somebody that actually cares about them.
Yeah. So, and it's funny that you mentioned that. And obviously when we're getting into these type of topics, and for those of you watching, for those of you that are going to watch this in the future, obviously there are times where you have to be reserved about, using specifics and using specific situations on specific agencies. So a lot of the stuff that I'm probably going to mention, is obviously, and I don't want to say that it's cryptic, but yeah, I mean, I've worked for bosses who could have cared less about me, my family, my wife, my kids, my dog, my parents, whatever. They're a company person. That's what they worry about, is the company. And, it didn't help to make me feel like I was taken care of. I was a lot less forgiving about things because they, for a lack of better terms, I mean, they just didn't care about me. It was, well, I'm sorry, we can't do that because of this. Well, this sometimes has to be about us personally. And so I think it's really important that, when we're talking about management, and the thing that you said that I loved, and Andrew Kinsey said, as a member or a career firefighter, you can only care for so long before finding a different path. And I think so many of us have been in that situation where we were working somewhere or volunteering somewhere, and after a while, the BS exceeds the benefit. And so on our end, we're out the door. And the other thing that you mentioned that was really crazy, that just, I mean, it took me everything I had not to be like, there is such a disconnect between the administration sometimes and the people. What the people are saying and what they're asking for falls on deaf ears because the administration won't admit that that's the problem. It can't be that, because that would mean that somebody wasn't leading effectively.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's hard for people to look in the mirror and say, hey, I might be the problem. Think about that. I mean, that takes a big person to be able to look in the mirror and say, you know what, maybe I've been screwing this up. Maybe the reason morale sucks in my department is because I'm not being open-minded enough. I'm not listening to my people. I'm not caring about my people. I'm making it too much about me, or I'm making, too much about just the mission and not the people that are necessary to complete the mission. So that takes a pretty strong person to look in the mirror and say, I've got to make some changes, but it's necessary. And that's part of leadership is realizing that, you're not infallible. Colin Powell, I think you and I, we've talked about this several times with regard to the his 13 rules of leadership. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so one of them that I love a bunch of them, but one of them that I've always loved: avoid having your ego so close to your position that when your position falls, your ego goes with it. Now, of course, that's using a, kind of a little military analogy, but it's got nothing to do with being on the battlefield. Don't let a course of action that you're selecting, define you. Don't put your ego up with that course of action, because guess what? Plans change. Plans fail. You have to change mid-course. One of the things that I have learned, diving into the technical rescue world, and you think about it, it's true in life as well, is you've got to have, at least a plan A, B, and C, with plan B and C getting together, getting it started while plan A is going on. Well, right. I mean, sometimes, we've worked extrication calls where we got all the way to G, okay, with H, not far behind it. And so you got to be willing to do that outside of the fire ground. And I think sometimes in the fire ground, we're willing to make those changes. Okay, we're looking, the fire's not going out. We need to make a change. It's getting bigger. We need to make a change. But when we get back to the station, we get into that administrative side where now we have discretionary time, as Gordon Graham likes to say, to make decisions, and we get our heels dug in, and we're so committed to this idea or this policy or, whatever, that we feel like we're admitting failure, or that we're failures if we reverse course, even once we realize that it's a bad plan and it's not working. So again, it takes a big person to be able to say, you know what, this isn't working. I think we need to make a little modification, or we just need to scrap the whole thing altogether and go back to square one. And people just aren't willing to do that.
No, I completely agree. And I'm going to take it one step further. I think, we use emergency scenes as a crutch. Right? We have excuses that we can use on an emergency scene. If we have a structure fire and it's just not going out, oh man, they had a tremendous fire load in that back area of the building, or the basement was cut off and I couldn't get down into the basement to fight the fire. I mean, there's a shit ton of excuses that you can use as to why you sucked. Right. Yeah. And sometimes those are things that happen that we're just like, man, that fire got away from us. It happens. Hopefully you can get back on it. But in the administrative realm, you don't have those excuses, right? Those things don't exist. So I think you're absolutely right that, people can't bear to sit there and sit back and go, oh, well, I actually suck. Ooh, that's a hard, and even for me, I mean, I have done things in the past where I'm like, no, I'm not the problem. And then everybody around me is like, hey bro, I don't know if you knew this, but you're the problem. And I'm like, shit.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
It happens.
So what type of things do you think, as far as being a chief, what are the top 5 things when you wake up in the morning, you're like, okay, I need to make sure I don't do this? What do you do to keep yourself out of those situations?
So step 1 or rule 1 is to try to remember that, hey, you've trained your people. Let them do their job. Stay out of the weeds. Let them do things. If they need help, they'll ask for it. And so sometimes it's hard to sit back. And this is any situation. It doesn't necessarily have to be the chief. It could be a lieutenant. It could be an instructor. It could be whatever. If it's something that you've done before, if it's something that you're really good at, and you're sitting there and you're watching folks do it, and maybe they're not doing it the exact same way that you would do it, you have to fight that urge sometimes to jump in. At the end of the day, am I more concerned of how they do it, or am I more concerned with the end result? And so what works for me on that is I used to get, when I was in the military, I used to be in the commander's office, at least one of my commanders. I was in a commander's office on the regular because he was a micromanager. And I had been fortunate. It's kind of cool as a medic in the Army, because if you're attached to a non-medical unit, people don't really know what you do when you're not, patching people up. So they kind of just like leave you alone and let you do your own thing. And you may get an assignment or a task in here or there. And I've always had worked with commanders that really didn't care how I did it, as long as I met that end state or that commander's intent. And I ended up working with this guy, or working for this guy that he didn't try to tell me how to do my job, but he wanted me to articulate to him every step that I was going to take to perform whatever it was that he had asked me to do. And so we clashed a good bit. So rule 1, I try not to be that guy. That's one example of many that I could give of poor leaders. So I try not to be that guy. Trust your folks. And then also recognizing their capabilities, because there are going to be some times where they are not going to be ready for whatever it is that they're having to face. And so kind of knowing, it goes back to knowing your people, not just knowing, about the wife and the kids and the family, but what's their background, on training. Is this their first, if I got an officer in command of an extrication call and it's their first extrication, maybe I need to kind of, not get in there and take over and run it, but, maybe kind of keep a closer eye on things, and let them still have that confidence, let them get that experience, but not come in and micromanage the process. So understanding your people, not just from a personality standpoint, not just from a family standpoint, but from a capability standpoint. We all have, whether we're career or volunteer, we all know, certain crews have certain capabilities and others, maybe not so much. Okay. We all have an A team and a B team. Yes. In a perfect world, everybody should be the A team. Sometimes we may even have a C team, and it may just.
Yeah. It's called A shift, B shift, and C shift.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, changing one person out, changing one experienced person out on a crew with somebody without experience or with little experience can change the whole dynamic and capability of that crew. So know your people, trust your people. And there's the old saying, don't be a dick, don't be an asshole. Sometimes you have to be, and that's just my philosophy. Some people may argue with it, but you got to use it sparingly. It's a switch, and sometimes when I teach that, I'm sure my captain's listening now. I give him a hard time because when I was kind of growing and developing him into being a captain, I taught him how to be an asshole, and somewhere along the line, I forgot to tell him that there was a switch, and that
you forgot to tell him that he could turn it off.
Yeah, it's okay to turn it off. Okay, just use it sparingly, and you'll be good. So, but overall, on a general consistency, day in and day out basis, don't be an asshole to your people. Only when it's necessary to convey a point. that's probably the biggest thing. So I think I'm up to 3 now. And I feel like that probably sums it up. And I mean,
those are good rules, man. I mean, those are good things to live by.
Yeah. And honestly, in our department, give a shout out to Mark Von Oppen and Fully Involved Leadership, because we took that a number of years ago and we basically brought that back to our department and kind of set that structure up within the department with regard to, do your job, treat people right, give all out effort, have an all in attitude. And then sitting down and defining expectations.
Sure.
I'm huge on that. So many times I think leaders get themselves in trouble because they get frustrated, they get pissed off because, Joe or Jane firemen are not, they're not performing up to expectation. They're not doing what you want them to do. And the first question that I always ask is, did you define the expectations? Did you tell them what you wanted them to do? And if you didn't, then it's kind of hard to be pissed off at them if they fail to meet the expectations. So clearly defined expectations is absolutely crucial. I don't care if you're, company officer, battalion level chief, or all the way up to the chief of the department. If you're managing or leading subordinates, you have to have clear-cut and defined expectations. And one of the things that Mark talks about in his class that I've adopted, and I sit down with folks, he does the 10 for you, 10 for me. And he has the 10 expectations that his people can have for him and 10 expectations that he has for his people. But, you can change that up. You don't have to use his. It doesn't have to be 10. But the cool part about that whole process is not necessarily the expectations themselves, but the sitting down with the individual and having the conversation of, what does this mean to you? Right. Because we can all sit there and look at, let's talk about risk management. Okay. Risk a lot to save a lot, risk a little to save a little, risk nothing to save nothing. Well, what's a lot? What's a little?
What's a lot to you? What's a lot to me?
Exactly. And so, you can't, when you throw stuff like that, out there. So when you're sitting down, you can expect, basically for me to maintain a high standard of performance at all times. I keep the bar set pretty high. All right. So, but what does that mean? And so, asking the individual, hey, what does that mean to you? When you read that, what do you think? And let's see if we're on the same page, because sometimes it's not just as simple as communicating the expectation on paper. It's how does that person interpret that expectation? And so sitting down and having that face-to-face conversation, not only do you get more comfortable with each other, you get to know each other a little better, but you make sure that everybody's translating the words into the same language.
Right. No, I completely agree. And I think, when you talk about, and it's a good segue into, how you're going to shape your people and also how they're going to view you, right? So like you talked earlier about certifications and how you have a lot of paper, but not all of it means something. So, whether you're talking about, and you came from the military side, and there's a lot of, DOD requirements that are different than municipal firefighting, right? So you and I had talked a long time ago about municipal firefighters who go and do DOD firefighting, and they get every certification known to person. It's like every certification in the book they can get, and they're required to have. But when it comes down to it, do they actually know how to use those certifications for a purpose? And Absolutely. 9 times out of 10, it's like, well, it was just some class I had to take. And, if it's not specific to ammunition or artillery shells or aircraft rescue firefighting, it's like, I just had to have it. And then we threw it in a folder and that was it, right? And so a lot of people that I know, including some of the people that I've worked for who are DOD, are like, yes, there are things that we do just because it's a piece of paper. So how do you complement that, the certification and the learning, and then actually what you're applying it for? As a chief, how do you view that?
So, and I have this conversation. We had this conversation during the car ride back and forth to Syracuse. Almost the exact same thing. And so, from a chief officer perspective, I need those pieces of paper as a CYA that we have met an NFPA standard and that we have something to fall back on if shit goes wrong. Now, just because you don't have that piece of paper. And I'm having this conversation with folks that, sometimes have a hard time passing a commission test or an IFSAC Pro Board test. And I've got guys that can do the job. They can do it. They can do it hands-on. They can do it better than a lot of other people out there, but they suck at taking tests. And so it's not that they can't perform the job. And really the piece of paper becomes like I said, it's a CYA. We trained our people to this NFPA standard, this edition. And of course, we're going to take that and we're going to grow it. If you go to Rope Ops or Rope One or whatever they're calling it this year, and you take that class and then you get that certification, okay, that's great. You have the bare minimum standards of how to tie knots, how to rig systems, how to do some basic, rappelling, lowering, low angle stuff for the most part. You've got the basics down, but, not only is that a perishable skill, but also, not everything that's required in that class is necessarily practical for real world application. And not everything that you're going to need for real world application is even covered in the class,
right.
Excuse me. So for example, all of our rope equipment is the latest and greatest, CMC 11 mil rope, lifeline with, clutches and,
gold plated.
Yeah, it's next level stuff. Right. And so, the standard that we were operating on with regard to taking the rope ops class and getting the Rope One certification and all that good stuff, we were still using racks and, just a whole different system and setup that, I'm not saying you don't need to know it. I'm not saying it's obsolete. And please don't think for a second that I am a rope expert. I am not. I am like brand new fledgling learning how to do this stuff myself. But I know that when we broke out our clutches and we started doing our low angle stuff, it was like, holy crap. What do we need all this other stuff for?
Right.
But at the end of the day, we had to learn the old system because that's what we're going to be tested on, because that's what the standard was. The new stuff's not in the standard. So my analogy for that is, yes, we had to learn things a certain way, and some of that stuff does carry over, and we still do carry some of that stuff as a backup. But we also have to learn how to use our equipment. And thankfully, we had some really good instructors that were familiar. They had stayed current, so they were familiar with the new equipment. So basically, we did every evolution in class both ways. But that being said, now the class is over with and we're taking tests and getting folks certified. That's cool. But now we need to train on our equipment and how we're going to do things and start developing our policies and procedures of how this is going to work. And it's pretty similar to, and I agree and I disagree, when we get a new recruit that graduates from fire school and, and we're like, okay, kid, now we're going to teach you how we do it, for real.
Yep.
And there's some truth to that. Okay. There is some truth to that. There are some things that we do that may or may not be covered in recruit class, especially if you're doing one that's, maybe put on by the state or it's a regional thing where you have a whole bunch of different departments. If you're doing one for, one large department or even a small department, you're teaching it your way. Maybe there's not as much of that, but at the same time, how much are we really deviating away from, what the book teaches? I mean, when we really think about it. So that's kind of how I look at that and I balance that. So, getting your officer one, okay, to be an officer in our department, you got to at least have your officer one. Does that mean you're automatically qualified to be an officer just because you got that piece of paper? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, there's dumbasses with college degrees. A lot of people don't realize that, or maybe they do. But
I think there's a lot of people that realize that, Chief. I'm not going to lie. There are many people out there who realize that.
There are dumbasses with college degrees. Okay, there are crappy officers with officer 1, 2, 3, and 4 certifications. So that's not the end all be all. So you get your officer one. Well, we need to be developing that leadership mindset. How do we do that? Well, there's classes left and right. Okay. And this is one of the things I talk about when I teach, I forget the actual exact quote, but there's more classes and books written on leadership than any other subject out there. Yet it's what we suck at the most in the fire service. And it's not just the fire service. You can go to business, business management, out in the corporate world, it's the same thing. And it's the human factor. It's the human factor of it takes a lot of effort to sit down and put others ahead of yourself. And as a leader, that's what you have to do. And it's, there's always a saying in the military, it's called rank hath its privileges, but there's a second part of the saying that everybody forgets. It's rank hath its privileges, but rank also hath its obligations. And, people want the privileges of the rank. They want the t-shirt, they want the red helmet, they want the white helmet, they want the gold badge, whatever. And they don't necessarily want to stop and realize that they have the obligation now to put people ahead of themselves and their own interest.
Well, and that's, there are plenty of sayings that are very similar to this, but, to keep it kind of PC, PG-13, everybody wants to do officer stuff until it's time to do officer stuff. And that's one of the hard things about being an officer is that it's like, oh, shit, that's a really big fire, and, oh, I'm in charge of this. So, and it could be even something as simple as, oh, that guy is drunk, or, oh, that girl was late 15 times in a row and now I have to deal with it. And so that's where I think people start shying away and they're like, oh, I have to do my job? Oh.
And I think that gets even worse on the administrative side. It's one thing to have the oh shit moment, when the building's on fire and you're in charge. I mean, that's obviously, that's a huge part of being an officer. But then there's also all that personnel stuff that comes with it. And let's face it, in most places, as an officer, it doesn't matter, company officer or chief officer, you're going to spend more time dealing with people issues than you are with tactical issues.
Right. No, I completely agree.
And so if you can't deal with the people issues, sometimes it doesn't really matter how good you are with the tactical issues.
Yeah. No, and that's the sad thing is that not everybody understands that disconnect. Like, you can be really, really, you could be a great firefighter and suck as a leader, and you could be a really great leader and suck as being a firefighter. I mean, it's just, you're not going to always get both. So that is for sure. So we do have two questions that I wanted to ask real quick before we get too far down the rabbit hole. So Andrew Kinsey said, how does a low-ranking officer motivate within a department failing its mission and not because of budget?
All right, so a low-ranking officer motivating within the. So I'm assuming, how do you inspire firefighters that's failing at? Okay, all right, I kind of get what he's saying now. So this one's tricky, and a lot of it's going to depend upon what your leadership capital is with the group that you're responsible for. And did we talk about leadership capital at FDIC, Dave?
We did. You and I did. I think we were extremely inebriated, if I remember correctly. There were a couple times that I was like, wait, what did we talk about yesterday?
Totally understand. and so what I mean by that, how much influence do you have? Because I'm a big believer that change is driven best from the bottom up than mandated from the top down. So if you're in that officer's position, it's like, how do I get my people fired up and motivated? So the cheat move that I do is I try to get them to a conference. Okay. Even if I can't get them to an FDIC or a firehouse or whatever, if there's a local conference, there's a regional conference, state conference, something like that, I try to get them outside of the comfort zone and where they're going to meet other firefighters. They're going to mingle with other firefighters. They're going to kind of see, oh crap, this is kind of a big deal. All right. And then hopefully they get a little inspiration depending on, what classes they took. And I don't mandate which classes people take, but I try to steer them sometimes. It's like, maybe, maybe underwater firefighting is not the best class for you. Maybe we ought to take nozzle forward, but whatever it is. So that's kind of my cheat move. And my guys are listening now. They're going to know why I encourage them to go to conferences now. But anyway, getting them outside of the local element and seeing how things are done in other places. And like I say, basically experiencing the brotherhood. And if that's done right, you can bring them, they will come back fired up and motivated, and hopefully spread that to the rest of the organization. I know for us, what ended up happening in our case was we had a couple of firefighters. They went to their live burn training with the State Fire Academy. the State Fire Academy fired them up. It's like, hey, go on and pursue your firefighter 1, firefighter 2, so on and so forth. This live burn is good for that, et cetera. And so they came back, and I think I was the training officer at the time, and they were like, hey, Lieutenant, I think we want to do our firefighter 1 and 2. Well, in Tennessee, you don't have to have firefighter 1 and 2. If you've had a 64-hour live burn and or 64-hour classroom class and then a firefighter 1 live burn, hey, you're good to go. Congratulations. Go fight fire. And, so most of my career, I had kind of been that same way. I had that live burn and I had that classroom class. I didn't have my firefighter 1 or 2 at the time either. And so they came back all motivated, fired up, and they're like, hey, we want to do this. And I'm like, okay. I have no idea how to do that, but I will find out. And I tell you what, I'll go ahead and do it with you guys. And so that kind of started our journey. But I mean, that was 3 probationary firefighters coming back from a class where they got motivated and inspired, and they basically changed the entire direction of our fire department. With those 3 folks coming back and saying, hey, training officer, we want to do this, this, and this. And then me, instead of being, hell, you don't need that. And, okay, hey, let's do it. And I'll do it with you. That then became the standard moving forward.
Sure. Within
our department. And so the trick there is, your people better than I do. So to try to paint with a broad brush of, hey, do this, do this, do this. The key is going to be finding out what motivates your folks. And the conference thing is a pretty good litmus test. If you can get a couple of them to a conference, get them to come back fired up and motivated, and not in a cocky, arrogant, hey, we went to this conference and we learned this and you guys suck because y'all are doing it this way, because that doesn't go over well.
No.
Okay. But if they come back excited, motivated, like, oh man, we learned a whole bunch of cool stuff. This was awesome, so on and so forth. And maybe that spreads. And then the next time a conference comes along, a couple other folks want to go because they heard how awesome it was from the 2 or the 1 or however many that went. So I found that to be an effective tool to get people engaged and motivated. I mean, I've had it come up a couple of times. I've had folks ask me, in private, obviously, but why are you sending so-and-so to a conference? They hadn't really done this, or they haven't really been an active contributor.
Right.
And it's like, why are you sending them to a conference? And it's like, you got to explain it. It's like, look, I'm hoping maybe they're going to go there and get a little fired up and motivated and come back. I was going to
say, we go to guys and gals like us go to conferences, and you come home and you're like, So if you're not motivated and you go to a fire conference, if you come back and you're not like, you don't need to be in the fire service. Like,
it's true.
It is such a motivation. It is such a motivation tool, and I love that. So one thing that I want to touch on real quick, because Andrew actually replied back with another thing. He said, unfortunately, I've been to one, but I've been denied to every other conference I put in for, trying to figure out how I can afford them on my own. So, Andrew, unfortunately, we can't go through like every conference that's in the country, right? But here's what I will tell you is, in my experience, the larger conferences, the more expensive conferences, sometimes they have scholarship programs. Sometimes there are local vendors who will, pay part of or all of to send a student. For some of the smaller micro conferences, I have had so many people over the years who have called me and said, like, hey, I heard you're going to this conference. I can't make it there until Tuesday, and I don't want to rent a room the whole time. Can I just hang out with you? And it's like, yeah, dude, just come on. So, and Andrew, I don't know, specifically your situation, but if there's a will, there's a way. There are plenty of conferences out there that have options to be able to go to. And even the ones that are, held online, if there's some that are held online that you can kind of pop into, or a Zoom conference or something like that, there's a lot of stuff. Now, it doesn't take the place of going and doing hot, for 4 days. But there are a lot of different things. So don't give up on that. I saw that and it kind of caught me out of the corner of my eye. And I didn't want to forget that. So the other question that we had so far is from Chad Small. So Chad said, jumping off Dave Pruitt's comment, I've seen it have been part of leadership that bends over backwards to improve every aspect of the department, but the guys on the floor are the ones causing the drama or the lack of progress. So how are you going to give a reality check without giving those on the floor a bad taste which would cause them to shut down even more. And I think this is a really, really unique question because it talks a lot about, okay, it's not the administration's fault. It's actually our own fault. And sometimes we're our own worst enemy. So what do you think about that?
So again, I think it goes back to getting to know those people and what motivates them. Okay. On the career side, especially, not everybody is there because they love the job. Okay. Some people are there because it's a great schedule that lets them do other stuff. And I get that. I understand it. It is a great schedule and it lets you do a lot of other stuff. Maybe it is, maybe they're there for money, maybe they're there for whatever reason, but you got to figure out what makes them tick in order to motivate them. So one of the big things that I talk about with regard to leadership is it's not a one size fits all. It's not a my way or the highway. And you can still be kind of my way or the highway, even without thinking you are, without, being, that asshole or whatever. You've got to tailor your leadership to the individuals themselves. I have some of my guys that I can be very direct and in their face and say, look, you effed this up. What the heck were you thinking? Blah, blah, blah. And then I got some guys that if I did that, they would shut down. Okay. Right. And they would probably go in a corner or be in a volunteer department. They would probably quit. Now, I don't use the whole, hey, what the F were you thinking kind of thing very often. It has to be pretty egregious to get there, but I'm just using that to illustrate a point. I've got folks that I can be very direct and say, hey, look, this is unacceptable. What the heck? And I've got some where, we have to kind of tap dance around and sugarcoat things a little bit to kind of get to the root of the problem. But I'm okay with that. That's part of knowing your people. That's part of understanding what makes them tick. So if the leadership is even if they're bending over backwards, maybe they're bending over backwards too much. Okay. Because, I love Alan Brunacini's quote about be nice. Okay. Well, be nice doesn't mean let people walk over you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Bending over backwards to help your people doesn't mean let them take advantage of you. And so, sometimes you can be trying to do what's best for the people and they don't see it. They don't realize it. Or they take your kindness for weakness. And so you can be doing all the right things, but if you're being perceived as a weak leader, folks are going to take advantage of that. I've used the analogy when I was a kid growing up, sometimes I was a hellion and sometimes I wasn't in the classroom. And having gone through a teacher education program in college to be a teacher, I kind of understood what that was all about. It was a thing called classroom management. And so when I had teachers that knew how to manage a classroom, I was a good little angel. And when I had teachers that didn't know how to manage a classroom, even though they were really nice and sweet, I took full advantage of that situation and got away with everything that I could get away with. Firefighters are the same way. It's adult daycare. So just because, you're being nice, maybe you're being too nice. Maybe you're not understanding what motivates and makes the individuals tick, and you have to literally sit down and not try to broad stroke brush it. Okay, this is what makes A shift tick. Well, why does that make A shift tick? Let's break A shift down. Okay, who's the officer on A shift? Who's the senior firefighter on A shift? And what motivates them? What are they into? How can I connect with them individually as a leader and person to person and figure out how I can inspire and motivate them basically to quit being, slugs or, whatever.
I'm still trying to get over the fact that you said that you were going to school to be a teacher.
I did. Yeah. So I went to college. I majored in agriculture science with a professional education option. So basically some colleges call it ag education. University of Tennessee called it ag science with professional education options. So I took all the ag science classes and then I took all the teacher education classes and actually had a teaching license for 7 through 12 biology and agriculture science.
Man, for everybody's sake, I'm really glad you got into the fire service. Just knowing what I know about you, and for those of you that don't know Brandon, when he said that, I don't know if you saw the look on my face. I was like, wait, what? You went to school for education? Not that you wouldn't be a good teacher. That's not what I'm saying. I just feel like you're better suited for, military and public safety. I feel like maybe that's more up your alley.
Well, if they would have let me have a chemistry classroom with a laboratory, you know,
Dude, you would have ended up on CNN or Fox News. Let's be honest, right?
it'd have been good times.
No, I don't know. Well, maybe, possibly. All right, so no, I like what you said about that. And it's one of the comments that was actually said earlier, and I'm going to scroll back to it real quick because I saw it earlier. Somebody made the comment about running the fire department like a business has been a detriment to the fire service up until, now it's becoming a detriment. Listen, when you have a business and you're looking at a business model, you expect all the assembly lines to function the way that they're supposed to. So if you have 3 identical assembly lines and they're making the same identical parts, you want all 3 of them to work identically. And it doesn't matter the individuals who are running the machines, right? They just know that they have to make those parts the same exact way. In the fire service, it's way different, right? Like we have different personalities, different attributes, different traits. And so, yeah, I mean, when you look at some of the business models, some of the things are applicable to the fire service, but a lot of them are not. And so, like you talk about, and I want you to kind of branch off on this because you really talk about this well, talking about, motivated people and high achievers, the people that really want to be there and do the job and do it well, and the struggle that they have. And then on the flip side, what about the people that are unmotivated, the slugs, the people that you were just talking about and their perspective? So can you touch on that for a second?
So absolutely. So first off, being from Tennessee, I am 100% volunteers, go Vols. Okay. And I hate the University of Alabama with a passion, but I respect Coach Saban and what he has been able to achieve. And so I really think from a chief officer's perspective, the analogies of coaching sports align pretty close to your roles and responsibilities, at least as an administrative chief or a chief of department. And so he's pretty, he's got a pretty famous video, or it's made the rounds. You see it on the Facebook with a lot of the leadership sites and everything. But the quote that gets taken away from that is that mediocre people don't like high achievers, and high achievers don't like mediocre people.
So I actually have the clip. Do you want to watch the clip? Do you want to watch the clip real quick?
Hey, let's roll it.
All right, man. Hold on a second. Let me pull this up. So you had given me that quote in your class, and I had highlighted it. And then when I found out that you were going to be on the show, I was like, I gotta pull this clip. So let me pull this up. All right, check this out.
To be able to communicate with other people, and you have to work with other people. And you can never have any team chemistry for this reason. Mediocre people don't like high achievers, and high achievers don't like mediocre people. So if everybody doesn't buy into the same principles and values of the organization and the same high standard, you're never going to be successful. Just like our spring practice right now. You know what my goal with spring practice is? Get the right guys on the bus, get them in the right seats, and get the wrong guys off the bus. So one of these days, you're going to be working in an organization, and somebody's going to try to do that to you. So which one of those people do you want to be? Do you want to be somebody they're trying to get off the bus because you're satisfied with mediocre performance? Because you can never have any team chemistry in your organization if everybody's not committed to the same standard and the same things. When I worked for Bill Belichick, we had one sign in the building. It was, do your job. And you go in all these places and, you see all these things. One sign, do your job.
I love it.
Dude, it sums up exactly what you're talking about. I mean, listen, you and I have had this conversation, so I'm going to say what I said to you and the conversation that you and I had. I consider myself to be a high achiever. I consider myself to be someone who's willing to kind of go out there and try new things. And I've gotten a lot of crap for it, right? Like I have a lot of people who have a very strong aversion to me in that respect because I try to be a high achiever. But I have just as much issue with them being a low achiever, right? So it kind of goes both ways. And I think if you're receptive to that and you both understand the sides, you can either be on this side or you can be on this side. Which one do you want to be on? Because you can't sit there and be on this side one day and then back on this side and flip back and forth. It really is kind of that personality trait. So explain that clip a little bit more as it pertains to the fire service.
So first off, absolutely agree with you. So I catch a lot of crap. When I still worked on the career side, I caught crap. I catch crap within my own area for always going to training, always learning, and maybe sometimes not necessarily tolerating mediocrity as well as maybe they want me to. But I get it. And so it was an eye-opening experience for me one time. So I was at ISFSI had their annual fall conference in Knoxville several years ago. And so we had, several of us had met. We were from all different parts of the country. We were going out to eat. And so this was still maybe, kind of early on, of going to a lot of training, going to a lot of classes, trying to get educated and catching a lot of crap for it. And so I asked them, we were all just sitting around, the table eating. I was like, hey, did any of y'all experience, this, catching a lot of crap for going to conferences and being into the job and all that stuff? And every one of them at the same time just busted out laughing and was like, absolutely. And so, because at first I thought it was just me. And it
is so not you, bro. It is so not you.
I learned really, really, really quick that no, it's not. It's a nationwide thing. So going back to the Saban quote, and I love it because we've seen it. I'm very fortunate to not have to deal with a lot of mediocrity because we do keep our standards pretty high. And so with that, on the volunteer side of the house, it is a lot easier to get rid of somebody than it is on the career side, especially, depending on where you work and collective bargaining agreements and, how different state laws work and so on and so forth. But, what I love about our department is if you're not meeting the standard, then the organization kind of polices itself. It's pretty rare that, it may get to the point where you finally have to sit down with the chief because you're not getting the message from the rest of the department. But generally speaking, if you're not, doing those 4 things that we ask, do your job, treat people right, give all out effort, and have an all-in attitude, the rest of the department's going to let you know. So separating out the high achievers and the mediocre people. So you're never going to get 100% buy-in. And so you need to accept that going in. Okay. You're never going to get 100% buy-in, even in a small department like my own. How am I going to get 21 people to all agree 100% of the time on everything? It's not going to happen. So there's always going to be, the disconnect. Okay. So how do we minimize that? Okay. Well, it goes back to, again, finding out how do we inspire our people? What makes them tick? What motivates them? Why are they on the department? And when you understand why somebody's there to start with, and then what kind of things are they into, and get to know them as a person, you come back to being able to figure out how to inspire them. Will there be some people that you're just not able to inspire? Sure. Absolutely. And that does not make you a failure as a leader. There will be some people that you have to kick off the bus. Okay. And how you kick them off the bus is going to vary from organization to organization. All I say is, do it legally, do it right, and give people the opportunity to improve. My guys hear this all the time. They'll come to me, Chief, so-and-so, I don't know. I don't think they're going to make it. They're not doing what we want them to do, blah, blah, blah. And of course, first question, do they know what's expected? Why are you mad at them? Well, they're just not putting in the effort. Well, do they know that, we come down here and guys are down here every night and that they're welcome to come down and put in time to get better and so on and so forth? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. If they don't, let them know that, hey, you can come down here, put it out. We use GroupMe to communicate and, put it out on GroupMe. Hey, I'm coming down to the station and, I'd like to throw some ladders or pull some hose or something like that. But, I get criticized for this sometimes. I give too many chances, which is so funny because so many people think I'm an asshole. But
I'm not going to disagree with that, but
sure.
Go ahead.
I give you chance after chance. If it gets to my level, if it's made it to my level, I'm going to try to give you every chance to succeed.
Right.
till it finally becomes obvious that, hey, you're not a good fit. So what Saban says as far as getting the right people on the bus and in the right seats and getting the wrong people off the bus, I wholeheartedly agree with. I talk about a lot of times putting, square pegs in square holes and round pegs in round holes. What are people interested in? What motivates them? Again, getting to know them. So, I've got some guys that are pretty mechanically inclined. They do mechanical work, outside of the fire department. And so guess who works on stuff that breaks? It's going to be those guys. Guess who, gets put in charge of making sure stuff gets fixed? Given that little bit of responsibility, given that purpose, the Army defines leadership as, providing purpose, direction, and motivation. Okay. And sometimes we forget that. We just think about, okay, it's motivation, but sometimes people tick based on having a purpose. Okay. And having some direction. Everybody wants direction. Believe it or not, firefighters want direction. Firefighters want policies and procedures. I know this for a fact because of a department that I'm familiar with that has gone years without having any kind of formal SOGs or SOPs. And, to the point where, the folks are actually complaining. They're like, we want policies and procedures, because without policies and procedures, it's organized chaos or unorganized chaos, depending on the situation, because, this guy's going to do it this way and this guy's going to do it this way.
Right. There's no consistency.
There's no consistency. So, knowing your people and maximizing their strengths, okay? Maximizing their strengths, using them where they're good, and then developing and growing them in areas where they're weak, okay, without them even realizing what you're doing most of the time. All right. That is absolutely critical, because you can take a mediocre person and turn them into a high achiever. Not everybody's going to come through your door as a high achiever. It sure is sweet when they do, but not everybody's going to come through your door as a high achiever. You're going to have to figure out as a leader what makes them tick, so you can provide that purpose, direction, and motivation to turn them into a high achiever.
Right. Well, and okay, so I want to break off into that for just 1 second. So when you have people that come through the door, and I have had people come through as a company officer, and I have watched as a firefighter, back end firefighter, as people came in, and they are not high achievers. And so you put them with a group of high achievers, and you see them starting to, progress and slowly mold into that, right? So it's a product of their environment.
Yes.
And then on the flip side, you also see these people that come in that are super high motivators, or highly motivated, and you put them on a shift with a bunch of completely unmotivated or slugs, and you just watch it dwindle, right?
Happened to me.
Yeah. And it's
happened to me.
It's happened to me, man. And it really, I will say this, and I can actually say this because my crew and I have talked about this multiple times, and I know where I stand with them. But when I came in, it was, politically correct. I was doing everything in a very structured way, but it was, hey, have you guys thought about this? Hey, can we try this? Can we do this? And it was, a highly motivated thing. And it was, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Just come in, do your job, and go home. And I'm like, right, but I don't want to just come in and do my job and go home. I want to come in and do my job really well and make sure that the truck and and they're like, dude, listen to me. Just come in, do your job, and go home. And now, you fast forward a couple of years, and we're all on the same page, and we all see each other's benefits and weaknesses, and we kind of work around that. So what are your thoughts on that when you talk about as a chief officer, when you're looking at how to make those groups work? Do you try to put unmotivated people with motivated people?
Yes. So I try to assign people, either formally or informally, a mentor. Okay. And it may be, hey, look, you're partnered up with this guy and he's going to show you the ropes and everything you need to know. And so that's very, kind of formal. Or it may be me pulling one of my high performers to the side and say, hey, I want you to be this guy's mentor. And we never even tell the other guy that that's what we're doing. And I've done it both ways. And I kind of just, it's one of those things I just kind of read based on personality as to how we're going to do it. But absolutely, I try to get the high achievers to motivate the mediocre performers, or, transform them if they can. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And that's what you have to understand, coming into this is you're not going to see 100% success rate. And just, if you understand that going in and don't get deflated when it doesn't work, you'll be all right. You'll be all right. You have to understand. I mean, if you can hit the baseball, 3 out of 10 times, I mean, you're going to the Hall of Fame probably. So, I mean, it's the same way. I mean, it's the same way with it. You're not going to have 100% success, but if you can change, if you've got a shift, if you've got an entire crew of unmotivated individuals, that's going to be hard. That's going to be one of the hardest challenges. It's a lot easier when you at least one of them. If you got at least one of them that's motivated, to try to get at least one more motivated, and then once you have 2 of them motivated, it becomes a whole lot easier to start working on the other 2.
Yeah.
The hardest challenge will be is if you have 0 high achievers. How do you grow them? How do you develop them? And again, I go back to figure out what makes them tick and try to get them to a conference where they get outside of that comfort zone and they meet people from other places and they learn new ways of doing stuff.
Sure. Now, and this is something that gets brought up a lot, and I want to touch on this because, I mean, I already know the answer. I'm going to, you and I have hashed all this stuff out before. But, when we talk about the view of what a chief or a chief officer or even a company officer is to their crew, how important do you think it is? Like, we all know that it's important for the company officer to go out and train with their crew, right? Whether it's career or, full-time combination, I have seen chief officers who will show up for the annual physical agility test and do it with their people. I have watched firefighters of career departments show up to training classes and do live fire with their people. And I've seen it on the volunteer side as well. So how important do you think it is when we talk about leading from the front for the chief officers to be integrated with the crews like that? Like, I understand if you're on a fire scene, you don't expect the chief to crawl in behind you and be like, hey, I'm going to go over here and do a primary search. It happens, and it happens because it happens in my department sometimes too. But that's not the norm. So how important is it for them to see the chief or the chief officers lead from the front in that respect?
I think it's very, very, very important. If you've ever read Colonel David Hackworth's book, it's a long one. He's got a couple ones out there. One is Steal My Soldiers' Hearts, and the other one I just read, and it's escaping me right now. But and this is just one little small snippet in like almost 1,000-page book. But he talks about showmanship from a leadership standpoint. Okay, things that you do as a leader sometimes to motivate and inspire the troops. And that's one of those things. If you got a chief officer, battalion chief, division chief, deputy chief, however your department's structured, and they don't have to come out every single time. Okay. But just to know that they will come out. So we've got a class this weekend, SCBA using it. I've never taken that class. It's a 2-day class, Saturday, Sunday. I know we're going to do a lot of stuff in SCBAs. We're going to learn how they all work. And, some of it's going to be, recruit level stuff. Some of it's probably going to be stuff that we never even thought about. And we're going to do a lot of SCBA confidence stuff. And because I've never been through that, I plan on going through it with my guys. I'm going to be hurting when it's all over with because I do have some health issues that sometimes keep me from doing some of the things that I would like to do. But when I can, I try to do VES training. What's better than seeing the chief, bailing into a window, bailing out of the window.
I'm not going to lie. I kind of would enjoy watching you bail through a window. That would that would make my day.
It's cool stuff, and I pay for it the next day, but it's part of the process. It's part of it's not about me. Okay. It's about them. It's about inspiring them. I'm willing to get out there. I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to get a little dinged up and banged up. Because, in my world, I'm still carrying an SCBA and turnouts and tools in the back of my vehicle. When I get there, I don't know what all's coming. Okay. I got a pretty good idea what's coming from my department, but I have no idea what's coming from the departments surrounding me. And sometimes I don't know who's getting there first. So, depending on the situation, I may be geared up, ready to pull the line when the pumper shows up, or I may be geared up, ready to do that, and I got a full crew. So, all right, cool. I'm back to being like in the strategic mode. Or, if I show up late, I may or may not even put my turnouts on. Again, it's all situational dependent. But the fact that the guys know that if need be, I will pack up and pull the line right alongside you. I think that goes a long way. And I know a lot of chiefs. I'll just say I know a lot of chiefs that they're not doing that, and I know some that are. So it goes both ways. But I know some chiefs that would absolutely die if they put their gear on. I mean, like literally, we would probably
you can
be working
say that because you're a chief.
I mean, they would fall out and die because they look like they're about to fall out and die in a t-shirt. In the middle on the fire ground. So, I mean, they would die if they put their turnouts on. But, again, it's not something that happens every fire, but if need be. But in training, absolutely. If nothing else, it goes back to showing you that I'm willing to do what I'm asking you to do.
Yeah.
Now, am I going to put my gear on every single time? No. I'll be honest with you. I'm not. Some people will. I'm not putting it on every single time, but I'm going to do it enough that you don't have any question that if the shit hits the fan, Chief Fletcher is going to pack up and be right there with you.
Right. Well, and there's times where, and Jen actually said this, Jen Squire, she said, I'd rather my officer or chief try something and fail than not try at all. And I wholeheartedly believe that as well, right? And there are times in multiple departments that I've been a part of where, we're inside fighting a fire and all of a sudden it's, like, hey guys, what's up? And we're like, who the hell is that? And I'm like, whoa, hey chief, what are you doing? Oh, hey, I just want to come in and see what was going on. You guys need anything? And I'm like, we're getting ready to go put the rest of the fire out. Like, we're going to do overhaul. What are you doing in here? And literally it threw all of us off. We were like, what in the hell is going on right now? Why is the chief inside? But we had that understanding that he was going to be there. And there's another side of this whole thing too. I had a chief officer, it's probably been about 8 years ago. I had a chief officer who, when we were doing search training, obviously not live fire, but he said, okay, I'm going to lay down and I'm going to be the victim. And I said, wait, what? He goes, yeah, I'm going to be the victim. And I need you guys to drag me all the way out of the house. You'll find me, you'll get me, and you'll drag me all the way out of the house. And I'm like, okay. And he was just wearing a t-shirt and a pair of shorts.
Ugh.
And I was like, Chief, are you sure you want to do this? Like, we're going to drag you through the house. And he was like, listen, if you are going to be delicate with someone, you're probably going to be the most delicate with your chief, right? And I was like, yeah. He goes, think about the citizen. Think about the normal citizen who you're going to rescue. And think about how careful you want to be with them, right? And he wasn't talking about like being delicate while you're pulling them out of a fire. He's talking about not breaking an arm, not dragging them down a hallway and having their head jacked up in a doorway. And so as I kind of progressed down the training thing, and I think you and I had this conversation, I said every search class that I do now, well, let's be honest, most of the time I'm stripped down to my underwear, but sometimes I wear clothes and I make people drag me out of the house because it's different dragging a person, a real person, than dragging a mannequin. Mannequins don't get hurt. And so there are times where I've come home and I'm all banged up. I got broke stuff. And, Katie, my wife, she's like, what the hell happened to you? I'm like, I got drug out of the building 5 times. And she's like, why do you do that? I'm like, because it's important. Right? They need to understand that. So having a chief do that for me in my career was instrumental. And I would have never had the experience that I have now because of that. So
I like it.
So what do you, okay, so let me ask you this. So in respect to being a chief, right? We've talked about your people, like the firefighters. What do you expect from your company officers below you, right? So like whether it's, because do you guys have like district chief, deputy chief, assistant chief, something like that?
So we have deputy chiefs or a deputy chief, and then we have captains and sergeants.
Okay. So do you expect them to carry out your vision, or do you expect them to have a vision of their own that meets the organization's goals?
It depends. So we'll use the EMS side of the house. So I pretty much kind of stay out of that. I have a captain that serves as the EMS coordinator, and it's pretty much, I want us to have the best EMS program that we can have. but I'm expecting him to develop that vision and execute it. Let me know how much it's going to cost and what I need to buy for you. And so that's kind of where we're at on that. And then also with public education and fire prevention, like I have a few things that I want to see happen, but for the most part, that same captain, he did his managing officer project at the NFA on community risk reduction. And it was developing a community risk reduction program for the Gilt Edge Fire Department. So he put in all the research for that. He developed the entire concept. Why in the world am I going to go in there and try to meddle with that?
Right.
Because it's an awesome program that he put together. So I pretty well stay out of that. Again, there's a couple of things that I want to see happen, and I communicate that, and he makes it happen. He executes. Again, tell me what I need to purchase, to make your job, to make it easier. I'm growing and developing a training officer right now who, as that individual progresses, because we all know that is a tough position. Because you truly are at that point executing the vision of the fire chief through training the organization. Right. I'm hoping to unload some of that, some of that workload as well, as we kind of grow and develop and mentor that person into the training officer's role. So it's a mix. There's still some things that I'm very much, hey, this is what we want to do. Let's go forth and conquer. And then as I get, square pegs and square holes and round pegs and round holes, or the right people in the right seats, then I turn that off. I turn that over. I shed that workload. My deputy chief handles our administrative stuff. I think a lot of people don't realize just how much he does, crunching numbers and keeping statistics and making sure the reports are done and making sure that this report's done for the state and that report's done for the state, and, reporting information to our county and stuff like that. So, having people, again, that they fit into that particular position, because whether Right. It's personality or skill level or whatever, and utilizing those people to their full potential to achieve the overall objective of the organization. So again, it's situational. Some things I'm like, hey, go forth and conquer, run with it. And then some things I'm like, hey, this is the vision. This is what I want to see happen. Let's do it. So it's back and forth.
So, and I want to jump all the way back to the very beginning of this show. You talked about having that disconnect between the organization, the leadership, and the personnel, right? So, there's sometimes where there's that disconnect, and people who believe that the department is running just fine don't understand that it's not. And so I think it's really interesting to look at organizations that, the chief does everything because he's the chief or she's the chief. It's not always, you're not able to do that because there are a lot of people underneath you who have a better relationship, a better understanding of people's strengths and weaknesses. They have a better understanding of that person's, issues, whatever they may be in their personal life. And so as a chief, I think you almost kind of have to rely more on the people under you. And in the organizations that I've been in, with few exceptions, right, there are times that it has worked better to have those people kind of spread the wealth. And so it's really cool to hear you say that and kind of how you function in that, because and again, we've had a lot of these conversations prior to this. It's refreshing to hear that, right? Because you don't always hear that from chiefs.
I'm a huge believer in delegating. Now, you can't delegate everything, and here's the big secret about leadership, especially when you're sitting at the top all by yourself. I can delegate tasks all day long. I cannot delegate the responsibility, and I think that's without diving too deep. One of the classes that I teach is called Views from the Other Side of the Desk, and hopefully we're going to kick that off here in November at Tennessee River Weekend. And then I've applied to teach at a couple other places. And I think it's in February. I think it's being taught in South Carolina at the Chief Executive Officer Weekend. But it focuses on not only, things that you need to know before you take on a leadership role, whether it's company officer, chief officer, things you wish you had known, but also how your view changes as you progress through the leadership ranks. So I remember in the military, I remember my first tour in 2003, 2004. I was an E4 specialist. I had no leadership responsibility whatsoever until kind of the end of that tour when I got promoted. And I remember, not being so concerned about PPE and following the rules and, all of that non-fun stuff. And then I remember coming back for another tour in 2007, 2008 as a sergeant responsible for a gun truck crew escorting convoys. And it's like, oh shit, I'm responsible for these people. It falls back on me, not just from a disciplinary standpoint. I mean, that's one thing. People get caught up. Oh, I'm going to get in trouble if my guys screw up. Yeah, whatever. Who cares? I've been in trouble before. It's not the end of the world. But some of this stuff is like, if I don't hold them accountable, they can be injured or killed.
Right.
Doing the same stuff that I was totally cool with when I was their rank. And so that perspective changes as you move up. And the same thing happens in the fire department. We want to be critical, and some chiefs get overboard. Some chiefs, they get, incredibly safety conscious as they promote up to the point where it's a hindrance. Some chiefs, completely detach themselves from the rank and file of the organization. So it's a balance, but sometimes there's reasons that stuff occurs. Everybody wants to be a fire chief until it's time to be the fire chief, like you said about the officers. People. I'm pretty chill on the fire ground when everybody's doing their job and things are going the way they're supposed to. I get really, really, really agitated and worked up, and some people might even call me an asshole when people start doing dumb stuff. And especially when that dumb stuff has the ability to impact lives on the fairground, right. That, as an incident commander, I am responsible for. It might have been your inability to run a pump that caused the crew inside with fire all around them to lose water. But when those two guys burn up, there's going to be a minor mention of your incompetence in the NIOSH report. Okay. Right. And all of the liability is going to fall back on me as the incident commander. Even though you don't even work for me, you're not even one of my people. That's just how that's going to go. And so a lot of folks don't understand why, he changed when he became a company officer, or he changed when he became a chief. Yeah, some people let it go to their head. Some people, get all hung up on, hey, look at me, puff that chest out, and so on and so forth. But then at the same time, some people realize, oh shit, I had no idea that this is what I am now responsible for. I had, a lot of them will say, like, I have a new respect for Lieutenant so-and-so or Chief so-and-so or whatever, because I had no idea that they had this level of responsibility on their plate.
Right.
I see a lot of folks in the volunteer world, man, they want that white helmet and gold badge. They want to be able to say, look at me, I'm the chief. And they have absolutely no clue, not only how to run their department, how to manage their people, but they're a liability on the fire ground.
Right.
The view changes as you move up, and you go from sitting on, standing a lot of times on one side of the desk to sitting, behind the desk. So that's one of those rabbit holes we said we would end up down.
Well, no, and I mean, it's good. We're at an hour and 20 minutes. So we're getting ready to wrap it up, but I think it's so important for people to understand that when we talk about leading from the front, and your viewpoint of leadership and my viewpoint of leadership is not unlike others, right? Like, it's really cool. And I am by no means comparing myself to some people, but when you go and sit in on people that you look up to as a mentor in leadership, and they're talking about something that maybe you haven't heard before, their viewpoint on a certain topic, and you're like, yeah, it's exactly what I thought. It's refreshing, right? And then there's the times where you hear stuff and you're like, well, God, I never really thought about it that way, right? It's a whole different perspective. So people have to understand that when you become a company officer, or when you get put in some sort of leadership responsibility, even if it's an FTO, even if you're a back-end firefighter and you are responsible for the rookie, right? That is a whole different level of responsibility than just being the back-end firefighter and not having anybody to train, right? Or to be in charge of. And so Yeah, there are times where it's like, man, I really let that guy down, or man, that girl really probably should have been given another chance because of who she was with, and we failed her. And so, yeah, those are the tough decisions that we have to make as leadership, that a lot of people don't understand, and they're just like, well, you just let it go to your head. No, I'm taking it more seriously because I'm ultimately going to get held responsible. You're not.
That's the absolute truth. I mean, it all changes once you get put in that leadership position. Again, as I said before, you can delegate tasks all day long, but you cannot delegate the responsibility. At the end of the day, I may let my captain run the EMS program, but if something goes wrong in EMS, guess who they're coming after? They're coming after the fire chief. They're not coming after him.
Right.
They're coming after the fire chief. They don't even know who he is. They're like, oh, the fire chief, Brandon Fletcher. Yep. So yeah, we're going to sue the city of Gilt Edge, and we're going to sue Chief Fletcher, and anybody else that we can loop into it. And so with that, I mean, you can't be scared of that. You can't let that, if I do this, I might get sued. If you do nothing, you may get sued.
Right.
You can't let that fear dictate how you lead the department, but you need to understand and be aware of it and make sure that you're putting competent people in the right places, putting the right people in the right seats and getting the wrong people off the bus.
Yeah. Just like they said. So, okay. So let me ask you this. How can people contact you? Where are you going to be next? I mean, what is the world of Brandon Fletcher right now?
Oh, goodness. So the easiest way, so you can follow me on Facebook. I think you threw the link up there. I'm on LinkedIn as well. Did I give you my email address? They can email me. Do I need to give that to you real quick there?
Yeah, let me.
Or you've got it. You've got it, the docfletch135 at yahoo.com.
Yep. It's just everything that you have is docfletch135, and then it's just at yahoo.com for your email.
Yeah. There you go. And so with that, let's see, we're teaching in Tennessee River Weekend in Savannah, Tennessee in November. I will be at Firehouse Expo coming up here in September next week. Actually, I leave next Wednesday. I'm teaching on Friday, and Friday morning, 9 or 10 o'clock. I probably need to clarify that, especially with the time zone and everything. Sorry, Pete, if you're listening, I have to go back and look. And then I know we're doing a roundtable, a chief officer roundtable discussion Friday afternoon at Firehouse as well. And
awesome.
Then I've got a coming up in South Carolina. I think anybody can sign up for it, but I know it's geared towards South Carolina State Fire. We're doing a 3-hour online version of shaping your volunteer fire department to meet today's expectations. And then I will be at the South Carolina Fire Chiefs or Chief Executive Officer Weekend. I may have totally screwed up that, but
I mean, it is like the longest name in history.
It is pretty long. It hasn't been officially announced, but that's coming up in February, and we'll be there doing the views from the other side of the desk class. And then I will be at Les Lukert again in February as well in Nebraska, hoping to see you there.
I will be there as well.
And I'll need to talk with Chris because we talked about it at FDIC. I'm not sure if I'll be doing Shaping Your Volunteer Fire Department or if I'll be doing the views from the other side of the desk, or I may do both. So however they want to do that. So. And I've got a couple of other, applications out there. Fingers crossed, if anybody's listening. Maybe a couple other places. And of course, I'm available if folks want me to come out and talk to their department, put on a class, whatever. They can reach out to me, and we can get all that stuff worked out as well. So
quick funny side story. Now that you mentioned that, so. At Les Luker was the first time that you and I met in person. And, I come walking in and I'm sitting there and I'm getting ready to do my class. And Brandon comes walking in, he sets down his bag, and I don't even really think about it. And so we're doing our thing. And I walk over and I pick up a bag that looks just like mine. And it's it is identical. It's the same exact damn bag. And I picked it up and I'm like, why is this bag empty? I'm like, oh my God, somebody stole all my stuff. And I started freaking out until I looked down and there's a thing right on the very front that says Fletcher and it's got all your military badges. And I was like, okay, I've had this bag for like 15 years and I've never met anyone with the exact same bag. So we have a picture somewhere floating around. I should have found it before this of you and I standing, in our suits with the same exact damn bag. So that's how you can trust people, is when they have your exact same computer bag.
I've had mine for about 15 years too. So I don't think 511 makes it anymore.
I don't think so. I think they make like a newer version of it. But it was, the same color, it even had like the same wear spots, it was insane. But no, so you're going to be at a lot of different conferences. I've heard your message. I've had the opportunity to sit down and talk with you. I can't thank you enough for joining us tonight and kind of giving us your view of leadership from the front. It was super cool to hear your perspective. And I know people people have already sent me messages saying that they want to hear more. So definitely reach out to Brandon if you get a chance. A couple of the housekeeping things for Valor Fire Training. So we are on a new platform for our streaming. So if things went well, please let us know. I know the first time that we did this a while back, there were some glitches with the system. This seemed to be much smoother. I didn't really have any issues with it, so let us know how it looked from your guys' perspective. Also, we have 3 different companies that we spoke with at FDIC that we're going to do product reviews for, so look for that on YouTube. We're actually going to do the product reviews in the field, take them to classes, get video and content, and then post them back up there. I won't reveal what they are, but one of them is really, really technologically cool. The other one really, really helps you breathe. And the last one sprays a lot of water. So you guys can take a guess what you think it is. I don't care, but you'll find out when we post it. The next thing is on September 15th, we are going to be doing a show with Dave Pruitt. So Dave Pruitt's going to be talking about utilizing live structures or acquired structures for fire training. If you guys don't know Dave Pruitt, he is like the guru. He's like the godfather of acquired structures. Like if you need an acquired structure anywhere, he's down in Texas. You call this guy, he'll get you like a whole block of houses to burn. Also, quick side note, that's like the 7th cup that you've drank from. How many different cups do you have?
I only have 3 sitting here.
Are they all 3 different drinks, or are they all 3 the same?
Well, so this one's empty. That's my mason jar of scotch. And then, this is some kind of energy drink to counteract the sedative effects of the scotch. And then I promise you that this one is water.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. I totally don't believe you, but I'll take your word for it. So, okay, I saw you do that, and I'm like, God, that's like the different glass. All right, so September 15th, time to be announced. We'll post something on Facebook. And the last thing that I wanted to touch on real quick, tonight is September 10th. And tomorrow is the 20th anniversary of September 11th. For me personally, and this is just my personal feeling, I'm going to bed tonight. I'm on I just started my 4 days today. I'm going to bed knowing that I'm going to bed with my family, and I'm going to spend some time with my family tonight. And I want everybody to remember those who gave their life tomorrow, 20 years ago, and they were able to do the same thing, and they didn't come home the next day. So, we talk about never forgetting. We talk about the ways that we're going to remember that event and the murder of those people. And so, again, you can't say it often enough that we don't forget. And so I've been going through and looking at different bios of the people that I've climbed for the last, 20 years or however long they've been doing the climb. 10 years, I think we've been doing the climb. But whatever it is, however you remember 9/11, take time to spend with your families, take time to spend time with your crews if you're on shift, and never forget the not only 343 firefighters that died, but all the ones that have since. So, Brandon, you got anything?
Man, I think you pretty much you summed it up on that. I'll throw one last thing out there on leadership. A lot of it's very similar. It's just packaged differently. So I encourage you, if you're in a leadership position or you're wanting to be a leader, get out there, get some different takes on it, and see which one kind of works for you. Frank Viscuso does a great Step Up and Lead program. Colin Powell, we referenced him earlier. He's got a couple of books, My American Journey, and then It Worked for Me in Life and Leadership. Both of those are phenomenal books. John Maxwell, Fully Involved with Mark Von Oppen. Lots of different options out there than what I just covered, but check them all out and see which one resonates with you. And just, remember at the end of the day, when it comes to leadership, if you remember nothing else, put your people first and take care of them.
Amen to that. All right, everybody, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We're right at the hour-and-a-half mark. So for those of you that were not able to catch this live, you can listen to it on YouTube. And also, we're going to put it on our podcast, so you'll be able to listen to it there. So everybody have a great night. Brandon, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Dave. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Take care.
You too.